Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Game of Thrones 5 Least Favorite Characters. This video is a part of a series of videos that I'm doing where I count down my favorite and least favorite characters of Game of Thrones. So this video, I'll start out with giving my 5 least favorite characters of Game of Thrones, and then I'll move on to a few other top 5s, including my top 5 dead characters and my top 5 supporting characters. So this is based just off of the TV show Game of Thrones, although sometimes I do compare some characters to their book counterparts. And since I'm doing a dead characters list, I'll have to give a spoiler warning to up to the end of season 4. So these aren't meant to be an objective or absolute lists in any sense of the word. A lot of people have different opinions on different characters that they like or prefer or would rather focus on. So these are all just my opinion. It will help you to understand my various Game of Thrones reviews, just to let you know my perspective on which characters I prefer to focus on. So I'll start with my bottom 5 least favorite characters, which was collected from any and all characters on Game of Thrones, main or supporting, dead or alive. These are the characters I least prefer to watch, and whenever they come on screen, I tend to just be waiting for them to leave. Number 5 is Jaime Lannister. I know this might upset a lot of people because I know a lot of people consider him a favorite, but as I said in several other videos, arrogance is a quality that annoys me to no end, both in real life and in fiction, and no other Game of Thrones character is more arrogant than Jaime Lannister. My favorite scenes with him were the ones where he got his hand cut off by Locke and was treated like shit by him. I felt he finally got what he deserved, and because his show character is, in my opinion, a bad adaptation from the books. As in the books, he's a believable character that seems like a bad guy in the first few books, but then you learn more about him once he gets his own voice viewpoint chapters in the 3rd book, whereas in the show they totally overdo how big of an asshole he is in the first 2 seasons by having him do stuff like kill his own cousin, and then in the 3rd and 4th season they completely overdo how much of a nice guy he now is, making the sort of shift in character a lot more dramatic in the show, making what was a believable transformation in the books an unrealistic one in the show. Number 4 is Theon Greyjoy. Note, I'm just saying Theon, not Reek. I'm actually excluding his Reek persona because I actually find that character really interesting, even though I know technically it's the same person. But Theon was the one who annoyed me the most. Every time I saw him in the first season, I'm like, why are they bothering to show this stupid, annoying guy? He's obviously an idiot with too much confidence and not enough sense. And this gets worse when he gets more screen time in season 2, where he betrays the only people who ever cared about him. However, his season 2 story arc is another example of a bad adaptation, as in the show he comes off as much more idiotic and useless than his book counterpart. And in season 3, when he was getting tortured, it was incredibly boring, and I loathe those scenes with him. Number 3 is Selyse Baratheon, wife to Stannis. Honestly, I found this character annoying in both the books and the show. Every scene with her was so boring. She adds nothing new, and she's just a moron who is a religious zealot who lets her husband bone other women just because of her god. And she treats her daughter, who is obviously much smarter than she is, like shit. A really boring character. Number 2 is Maester Pycelle. My god, I can't stand this guy. Some of my favorite scenes in the entire series was when Tyrion threatened him and had Bronn cut off his beard and threw him in the Black Cells. That was awesome. I only wished he would have stayed in the Black Cells, because when he got out and Tyrion fell into trouble, he became even more of a gloating ass. No one is as big of a suck-up as this guy. He even blathered on to the prostitutes he sleeps with on how noble Joffrey is. Ooh, Joffrey's the most noble king we've ever had. And in the court, he threatened and chastised Sansa several times. He's basically the mindless, soulless lackey, and unlike his other counterparts on the small council, like Varys and Littlefinger, he is a complete and total moron. Ooh, I hate this guy. And my number one least favorite character is no big shocker, it's Joffrey Baratheon. A lot of people were praising the character of Joffrey as a good villain, someone you love to hate. I personally don't think he was a good villain, I just hated to hate him. To be clear, I think he did serve a function in the story and was necessary, but I hated every time he was on screen. What a lonesome character. And the difference between him and actual good villains like Tywin and Cersei is he is a total moron and a coward who just likes to always get his way, and he takes pleasure in torturing people. And what separates him from Ramsay Snow/Bolton is Ramsay is a strong battle commander and a smart tactician, whereas Joffrey is a coward and an idiot. The term spoiled brat was invented to describe guys like him, and he was so incredibly frustrating and annoying to watch, and I was just waiting for him to die. Not only because I wanted to see him get his just desserts, but because I wanted him to go away, and his death was really satisfying. However, I think it was a bit too easy. In the books, he ripped out his throat trying to get to the poison. I think it's a real pity that the show didn't do that as well. That would have been much more satisfying. So next I'll get to my top 5 dead characters. These are characters whom by the end of season 4 have died. They can be either supporting or main characters, but they are characters whose death saddened me because I wanted to see more of them. Number 5 is Renly Baratheon. A coward who knew nothing about how to fight wars, but a brilliant politician. And when you're that smart and loved by the people, you don't need to know how to fight because others will do it for you. Namely, his lover Loras Tyrell, who was one of the greatest swordsmen in the Seven Kingdom, and because of the large army his family commanded, which he acquired by marrying his sister Margaery, Renly was an interesting character who I wanted to see more of, as he struggled through his fake marriage with Margaery and someone who was smart enough to make an alliance with Robb Stark and could have easily defeated the Lannisters had not Stannis killed him. Renly, you will be missed. Number 4 is the Spice King. A minor character I know, and some might find it strange I chose him over people like Ned Stark or Khal Drogo, but I really like this character. Yes, he was a pompous ass, but that's what made him so interesting to watch. Every scene he had with Dany was brilliant. She blundered around like a naive child demanding everything. He was always there to put her in her place. I absolutely love this guy, and most notably, he is the only show original character to appear on any of my top lists, unless you count the next character who was technically in the books, but nothing like her book counterpart. And that is my number 3, Shae. I know a lot of people hated Shae and found her really annoying, and she ended up on a lot of people's worst list. But I made a whole video explaining how I thought her storyline was totally awesome. Yes, she certainly was annoying at times, particularly when she would whine to Tyrion and treat him like shit because she was jealous of Sansa, but those actions were totally necessary for her character where they would take her storyline. Her relationship with Tyrion was so dynamic and their love story so tragic. It was one of the highlights of the series in my opinion. She was a dynamic, tough character who actually loved Tyrion that was very interesting to watch. Number 2 is Robb Stark. I was so pissed off at the Red Wedding, not because of anyone else who died, but namely for Robb. I hadn't read the books at the time, so I didn't know that his character was a lot more minor in the books than he was in the show. Robb Stark in the show was played so well by Richard Madden, and the writers took that and ran with it and made him a much more interesting and dynamic character. And more than that, he was someone you really could root for, even more so than Ned in my opinion. I really wanted to see him take down the Lannisters so bad, and that's why I found the tragic death so frustrating, but overall, he's a character I always wanted to see more of. And my number 1 favorite character who is now dead is Tywin Lannister. Tywin was the best and most interesting villain of the show. in my opinion. Unlike Joffrey, he is someone I love to hate and wanted to see more of. And Charles Dance was such an amazing actor who played him so well. Tywin wasn't an evil man who enjoyed cruelty for fun like Joffrey or Ramsay, but he was power hungry. He desired power for himself and his family and would do whatever it took to obtain and keep that power. If that meant making peace, he'd make peace. If that meant killing children, he'd kill children. And more than that, he was very clever. In my opinion, he was the one person on the show who knew how to play the Game of Thrones the best, second only to maybe Littlefinger. However, Tywin had an advantage over Littlefinger, having been born into being the head of a powerful house, and he used that advantage far better than many other noble lords. His main downfall was how badly he treated his son Tyrion, whom he had no regard for because he was a dwarf and represented to him everything that was weak, and that's what killed him in the end. So, moving on to my top 5 favorite supporting characters. Now, it's very arbitrary and subjective as to who is supporting or main characters. Since this is my countdowns, I made these determinations even though I know not everyone will agree with me. For supporting characters, I look mainly for characters that either only appear in a couple of episodes, or if they appeared in multiple episodes, they didn't have many lines or much screen time. For example, I consider Tormund Giantsbane a main character because he appeared in multiple episodes and had a lot to do, and I consider Mance Rayder a supporting character because even though he's more important to the overall story and more of a central figure, he only appeared in 3 or 4 episodes. Likewise, I consider the Hound a main character even though he's a lowly foot soldier. He has appeared front and center in many episodes, and I consider the Mountain a supporting character even though he's appeared in multiple episodes. He hasn't had that much screen time nor lines and was hardly ever the central character in a scene like the Hound was. So that's my rough outline for dividing main and supporting characters. If you disagree with any of my choices, I really don't want to hear about it because I had to draw the line somewhere, so just deal with it. So, my number 5 on my top 5 supporting characters list is Mance Rayder. I know a lot of people who read the books were disappointed because the character in the show is not as charismatic or charming as the Mance Rayder in the books, but I'd say he was just as clever and as commanding. I think once the showrunners knew they could get Ciarán Hinds for the role, they jumped at the chance because this is an amazing actor who certainly has the presence to play the King Beyond the Wall. And this character often is just drenched in wits and wisdom and comes off as someone who's always 2 steps ahead of you. And when he speaks, you shut up and listen, which is why I always enjoyed watching scenes with Mance Rayder. Number 4 is Walder Frey, who at first was played kind of like comic reliefs. Scenes with him were always funny, but they always had an undertone of dread because of the power this insane old man wielded. This, I think, was why the Red Wedding caught so many people off guard, because in that episode, he was just being a funny, cranky old man. Then all of a sudden, he starts killing everyone, and you're just like, whoa. No one is more dangerous, deceitful, and indeed he has always been known as someone you can't trust. This is one villain I want to see again, and one I would like to eventually see get his just desserts. Walder Frey, haven't seen you in a while, please come back. Number 3 is Syrio Forel. An interesting mentor type character, one who was very fun to watch not only because he was very wise and good at teaching Arya Stark to become a more effective warrior, but because of the tongue-in-cheek fashion in which he did it. He was simply a fascinating character to watch and, of course, an excellent swordsman. You'll note I didn't include him as a dead character, even though he is presumed dead, but we don't know for sure if he's dead because we never actually saw him die, which is why I didn't put him on the dead list. Personally, I hope he's still alive and that we'll see him again, but we'll just have to see. Number 2 is Tommen Baratheon. I always liked this character better than Joffrey, even through his very brief appearances in season 1 and 2 when he was played by a much younger actor. He was portrayed as a boy who had was much nicer and had much more of a conscience than Joffrey. Has an example is when Cersei asked him if he would like if Joffrey killed Sansa's brother, and he said, "No, I don't think I'd like that at all." And also his relationship he had with his uncle Tyrion was always a warm one, and Tyrion said about him that he turned out pretty good. So I was simply excited when I learned he would become king. Tommen in the show is quite different from his book counterpart, who is much younger and portrayed as a naive, fat little kid. Whereas in the show, he's a bit older, a bit wiser, and he's portrayed as a really gentle and kind young man. In other words, the opposite of Joffrey. But unlike Joffrey, he's more naive, and therefore easier for his mother and grandfather to manipulate. But things are going to get much more interesting next season when Margaery tries to use him against Cersei. I can't wait for that. And my number one supporting character is Jaqen H'ghar. I mean, come on. There's no character more badass than this guy. I suppose one of the things that make him so interesting to watch is his bizarre behavior. From the get-go, you can tell there's something a little off about him. Even the way he talks is a bit weird. Also, there's, of course, a magical element to him, as he promises to kill 3 people for Arya because she saved his life and the lives of 2 others. And whoever she names, he just does it. And on top of all this, he can totally change his appearance, almost like a shapeshifter. How cool is that? And honestly, I like him in the show a bit better than the books, as he has a closer relationship with Arya, and even invited her to become an assassin so she could kill off her enemies. So Jaqen H'ghar is my number one favorite supporting character. So that's it for my 5 least favorite characters of Game of Thrones video. Be sure to check out my top 10 favorite main characters of Game of Thrones, which I'll leave a link to in the description below, and make sure to check out my channel for other Game of Thrones videos, and subscribe to keep up with all the stuff I'll be doing in the future. And thanks a lot for watching.